Alright, hello. In case you haven't noticed, this week is a little bit of a shorter week as far as reading and material is concerned, because you have an exam. You're welcome. Anyway, there's some things I would like to go over about the genus Homo, the beginnings of the genus Homo, and Homo habilis, which is on your reading, and add a few things as well for this week. So first of all, let's just go ahead and look at really quickly going from Australopithecines to the genus Homo. Now there's going to be a theme, and there are going to be a few articles next week on this theme, is disagreements, arguments on not only how to categorize different groups, but which group led to the genus Homo. As you know from your discussion from last week, there's been several discoveries: Australopithecine gari, Setiba, as well as Africanus. And there's disagreement of which one of these three different species of Australopithecine has led to the genus Homo, which we're going to start discussing today. So, really quickly, a recap. This should be up online, but we discussed these three last week, and we're going to start discussing this little guy right in here this week. And what's really interesting about anthropology and paleoanthropology and looking at our evolutionary tree is, although we know a lot, we still have a lot of questions. For instance, how many species were there? How extensive was this radiation, hominin radiation? So was it only the species that we just talked about? Did they only lead to one species, Homo habilis, or were there multiple species? And the answer is, well, there probably was multiple species. Maybe the fossil evidence for them is somewhere in the ground. We have not discovered it yet. Also, how large was this geographical distribution? How far did Australopithecine setiba get to, or Homo habilis get to? So far, the early hominin fossils have only been found in South Africa, but this doesn't mean that they don't exist elsewhere. Here it is very important to remember that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, and time will tell. Basically, we need more evidence. So, if you feel like you like to be a digger, an archaeologist, a paleoarchaeologist, go on, get out there. Alright, let's talk about the genus Homo. Now, your book talks about it more specifically. Just quick, broad strokes for you right now. Genus Homo has generally larger brain cases, which means generally larger brain to body size ratio. And as our cranial capacity increases, our faces shrink. So we have smaller, less prognathic faces. That means our faces don't jut out as much. They're smaller, and as our faces get smaller, we have smaller teeth. We start becoming more efficient at bipedal movement. So although Africanus and Setiba may have been efficient at bipedal movement, they were nowhere near us. We also not only see a shift in the size of the skull, an increase in cranial capacity, but we actually see a difference in the change in the shape of the skull. And we're going to talk about more of this in a few weeks, about why this change happens and what it means. So let's really quickly give a little hats off to the Olduvai Gorge. Olduvai Gorge is the ravine in the Great Rift Valley where most of our ancestors' fossils are found. This is one of the most important sites for discovering our ancestors' fossil, and therefore it's worth mentioning. Alright, so let's talk about the earliest genus Homo that was discovered, Homo habilis. It was discovered in the 60s by Lewis and Mary Leakey. It was a 2 million-year-old juvenile with a large brain case, larger than any known Australopithecine, and enough to categorize it into the genus Homo. Now, just as a acknowledgement, it was Lewis Leakey, Philip Tobias, John Napier that did extensive research on this fossil, and they named it Homo habilis, or handyman, because at the time it was thought to be one of the only members of our ancestors to be able to use tools. We now know that Australopithecine gari, or Australopithecus gari, was the first member of our genus to use tools. So let's look at Homo habilis. Homo habilis was around between 2.4 and 1.8 million years ago. Very similar body plan to Australopithecus. So it was smaller, it was bipedal, it was pretty short, except for one big difference. It was 3.5 feet tall, about the size of Afarensis, except its brain was almost twice as big, an average of 650 cc's. And here we see tool use, and because of its shift in the morphology of its head, it's been argued that possibly had speech capability. We also see what we call a parabolic dental arcade, which is more similar to that of a human than of an ape. Now, I want to bring up something that your book doesn't bring up, and that's Homo rudolfensis. Homo rudolfensis is very, very similar to Homo habilis, except that it's larger. In fact, it is so similar to Homo habilis that researchers have argued it's the same species, just a sexually dimorphic version of the same species. So people have argued Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis are the same species, just one is male, one is female. We still need more evidence to know, and this is still very much debated. It's actually debated between other species as well. If Homo habilis may be more like Australopithecus, and it should change its title. So there is quite a bit of disagreement on taxonomy. I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll continue talking about the genus Homo next week.